Welcome to That's Gotta Hurt Live, wherever you're watching. I hope you made today, and I hope you're making tonight your masterpiece. My name's Dr. David Geier, double board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. Whether you play fantasy sports, whether you bet on sports, or you're just a diehard sports fan, I help you understand the injuries of pro and college athletes so you can win your fantasy league, hopefully win your sports bets, or just have more fun watching the games. Very excited to be here tonight. I will tell you, I'm a little out of breath because literally 15 seconds before we went live, it's upside down, I was wearing my Memphis Grizzlies sweatshirt. Make sure you can see it there, turning it the wrong way. My Memphis Grizzlies, according to Bleacher Report, somebody told me, are now the number one ranking in the power rankings in Bleacher Report. They're listed as one of the 6 true title contenders by ESPN for the NBA title. They beat the Golden State Warriors Tuesday night, which I told you in the Tuesday night show I was a little worried about. But another big win. Ja Morant is now second in the All-Star voting at the guard position behind Steph Curry. So very, very excited for my Memphis Grizzlies. And yes, we play again tonight, play the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is why I had my sweatshirt on. But I figure, all right, I'm going to try to be professional, right? I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I can at least try to look a little bit like one and wear scrubs. All right, we're going to get right to it tonight. First is something, I missed the show last night, but this came out right before I would have gone live, and so I felt like it'd be worthwhile talking about tonight. It's something we talked about in the show last week. That's Portland Trailblazers guard Damian Lillard, another great point guard in the NBA, will miss at least 6 to 8 weeks. He ended up having surgery for that abdominal injury we talked about last week. And I told you I was worried that what was going on, because it's weird to have a tendon injury of your abdomen. Most of your abs, which you can't really see in the screen there, but our muscles, they're tendons. Tendons are basically what attaches muscle to bone. And it's really rare to pull your abs off of bone. So what I suspected he had going on was what we used to call a sports hernia. We've gotten away from that term now. It's called athletic pubalgia. You see this in soccer, you see it in hockey a lot. Sometimes you see it in football, like in wide receivers. But it's basically where you have your adductor muscles of your inner thigh down here and your oblique abdominal muscles basically pulling in opposite directions, and you can get an injury that then the fascia, the tissue over that muscle, fails to heal, and you just have this chronic pain. It's not anything necessarily that gets worse if you play through it. It's just this aggravating lower abdominal and groin pain that is just really tough to play with, especially if you play a sport where you have to change directions and move side to side, where those adductor muscles pull across your body to change directions, and it just hurts. I took, for years, was the head doctor of a professional soccer team, and one of our players went to a guy named Dr. William Myers to have surgery for that. He's up in Philadelphia, and that's basically the only surgery he does. That's what he's known for, are those sports hernia surgeries. That's the surgeon that did Damian Lillard's surgery. So that makes me pretty confident that that's what he has going on. The good news is that surgery has very good success rates. Not really a huge risk much at all of recurrence, not really much risk of continued pain down the road. It's tricky though. I mean, in theory, you can get back as early as 3 weeks. Again, 6 to 8 weeks is a pretty rough timeline. I'll tell you, with the athlete we had, he was back in around 6 weeks, but he still felt it for a little while. So, Portland is really struggling. They're out of playoff contention. There's some concerns with new ownership potentially and new general management, and what are they going to do as far as trading Damian Lillard? There's a lot of thoughts about what that potentially could be. And what that could mean for the rest of the season. I expect that they will not rush him back and don't mind having a bad season, probably not making the playoffs anyway. CJ McCollum's out from his collapsed lung. Who knows when he's going to be back. So I don't see them rushing him back. 6 to 8 weeks absolutely makes sense, but it would not surprise me at all if this goes a little bit longer. All right, a scary injury last night. Chicago Bulls forward Derrick Jones Jr. had a really awkward landing, looked really bad. Reports came out today. MRI showed no structural damage. He's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with what's being called a bone bruise in his knee. Now, by saying no structural damage, that means, assuming that that's true, the MRI showed no MCL injury, medial collateral ligament, no injury of the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament, or PCL, the posterior cruciate ligament in the back of the knee, among other things. Also means likely no meniscus tear, this C-shaped shock absorber that you have on either side of the knee. All good. Those are, except the MCL. The MCL can usually heal without surgery, but the ACL, sometimes the PCL, definitely the meniscus, all would need surgery. Now, what's interesting is bone bruises are really tricky because, basically what that means, a bruise is, or a contusion is basically a bruise. So there was some kind of direct impact from that landing where the cartilage and bone on the femur basically, created a force and swelling and basically a bruise of the bone and cartilage on the tibia. And that sounds like not such a big deal. There's no structural damage, no surgery, but it's very painful. It can lead to a lot of knee swelling, and it can take a long time to go away. If you did an MRI on somebody with a knee bone bruise essentially every day, it would be about 6 weeks before that goes away on MRI. Now, that's only one criteria. Just because you don't see it on MRI, you don't have to wait until you get to that point to return to play. It's really more no swelling, full pain, full strength, ability to do your job on the court. That'll be kind of the interesting questions. 4 to 6 weeks seems about right. I can see a scenario, though, where it's actually a little bit quicker. All right, let's pivot to the NFL for the last three. It was announced earlier today that JuJu Smith-Schuster was designated to return from injured reserve. With the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver now has 21 days to return. Now, if you remember, week 5 of the NFL season, he dislocated his shoulder and actually had surgery for it. When you dislocate your shoulder, that's basically a way of saying the ball pops out from the socket, and typically the ball pops out the front of the socket. And the surgery to that, I don't know how well you can see that here, you're basically reattaching the ligaments. This is one of the rotator cuff muscles, but under that you've got ligaments and the capsule, and you basically reattach that with stitches and anchors. That surgery does really well. It's an arthroscopic surgery, takes 30 to 45 minutes. That was my favorite surgery in all of orthopedics forever. I love that surgery. But it is a fair amount of time to get over it. You have to let that repair heal, which, usually about 6 weeks, but then you got to get the motion back and get the strength back. But you have to do that sort of carefully, because if you stretch the motion too fast, you stretch out the repair. So it's sort of a little bit of walking a tightrope. You don't want to go so fast that you stretch out the repair, but you don't want to go so slow that the shoulder gets really stiff, which is its own problem. But again, usually 4 to 6 months is thought to be the time to return to a contact or collision sport like football. The challenge here is that you've got to avoid positions that pull your arm back like this. So as a receiver, catching things in front of you, no problem. But the question is going to be if he gets tackled in a way that pulls his arm back out to the side. Or if you land on the ground and have your hand out straight, you land on your hand, sort of forcing your arm back as your body, that force carries your body forward. Those are things to watch for. Now, maybe what they do when they let him go back to play, and the hope is that he plays in the game against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday, maybe they put him in a brace that limits his shoulder's ability to get back here, similar to what Baker Mayfield allegedly wore on his non-throwing shoulder most of the season with all his dislocations. That's possible. Again, it doesn't let you get back here. So for like a quarterback, that would be really difficult. But if something could kind of keep him in front of him, potentially could do it. My guess is that there's a pretty good chance he'll play. The Steelers really need him. They've got a really tough battle coming up against a heavily favored Kansas City Chiefs team. I expect that he'll probably try to go, but I would not bet that he'd be at 100%. I think you're looking at 60, maybe 70%. I hope I'm wrong, and it's just tricky. Is he going to be able to do everything he needs to be able to do on the field? Fortunately, again, all you got to do is catch the ball. All you got to do is run, but it's just the what if. if. The two questions we ask about is somebody ready to return to play is one, can he do his job on the field? And I think that is likely to be yes on Sunday with JuJu Smith-Schuster. But two, the second question you ask is, can he do more harm to it? And that's the one that in theory he could. So that'll be sort of an interesting one to watch. An interesting return to practice yesterday occurred in Green Bay with the Green Bay Packers. Linebacker Whitney Mercilus returned to practice, which is stunning because on November 14th, he tore his biceps in a sack of Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson. Now, the bicep is a muscle here, right? But it attaches by a tendon up at the top of your shoulder and then down below your elbow, right about here. And you don't tear the muscle. That's not what is happening with these NFL players. You tear the tendon off the bone almost always in the radius, much more than up in the shoulder. Older people can tear it up at the shoulder, but football players pull it off the radius just below the elbow. Now, that is not an injury that you can typically, it doesn't heal on its own, and if you don't do anything, you lose a lot of strength, not so much with elbow flexion, with curls. What you lose is supination strength, your ability to turn your forearm over. So later in life, it would be problems turning a doorknob, screwdriver, that kind of thing. So no, in a young athletic person, we fix it surgically. So if you do the math and think November 14th, he probably had surgery a day or two after that, but still, I mean, that's not even 2 months out. That is really, really fast. At the time, everybody said he was out for the season. There is talk that he may play. The Packers have a bye this week. Maybe he's off next week. There's a talk that he may play. That is stunning to me, but maybe they put him in a brace that limits sudden, forceful, full extension that in theory might stretch that graft or pull on the graft a little bit. But it's also kind of hard to believe that he's got full strength back at this point. But again, if you're talking about just wrapping up, maybe that's not a lot of biceps force, but if you're pulling somebody down, things like that, that could be really tricky. So yes, he may be back. I cannot imagine he'd be at 100%, and they've got plenty of depth at that position, so there may not be a need to rush him right back. But I bring this up more. It's just an amazing story as much as anything. And then last, on the same team, Aaron Rodgers was battling basically a little toe injury most of the season. And I thought it was funny earlier in the season, with all his COVID vaccine controversy and all that, people said he had COVID toe, which is a real thing. I'm the medical expert for 2 TV stations here in Charleston, South Carolina. And I actually talked about that in a TV interview one time about there was a small, rare group of people after getting COVID where their toes would turn this purplish color and be sort of painful and stuff, and it would go away eventually. So the speculation was he had COVID toe. Turns out, I found a report that finally explained what this is. He broke basically the toe of his pinky toe, the fifth toe, basically at the end of the fifth metatarsal on the outside of your foot. And it sounds like it was broken in a way that it didn't line up really well. So what they wanted to do, allegedly, was put a pin down it. And that's how you fix those if they need surgery. You just run a stainless steel pin straight down the end of the toe and it sticks out. The problem is you can't play with that. That would take about 6 weeks to heal, but it would stick out and catch on your cleat. It would break with any motion, so that's not an option if you're going to try to play. Now, if you're going to say, all right, we're just going to let him be out 6 weeks and then he comes back, all right, so be it. But then the flip side of it is they said, well, we'll just make it pain-free by doing numbing medicine. But they decided, hey, we can't do that because if the outside of his foot's numb, he can't push off, can't do what he needs to be able to do as a quarterback. So basically they did nothing, and he's been pushing through it for a long time now. He says he's going to be 100% with the first round bye, playing again next weekend. And that makes sense. The timeline, this has been going on 7, 8, 9 weeks, it seems like. So that seems about right. But anybody wondering why this has been such an issue for just a toe thing, that was the problem. All right, that is all I've got for you tonight. Revelation there. I do answer questions live occasionally on this show, but I do it if you want to join me tomorrow at noon Eastern time. I do a whole show, Ask Dr. Geier Live, where I'm happy to answer questions. So definitely join me there. I'm going to be headed down to cheer for my Memphis Grizzlies. I plan to be, if there's anything interesting to talk about, I plan to be here tomorrow night to talk about injuries of pro and college athletes. So join me, if not tomorrow night, if there's nothing going on, but I expect there to be. Join me tomorrow night, if not Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for That's Gotta Hurt Live.